What would you do if a little girl walked into your shop, clutching a torn-up teddy bear, and quietly said, "Can you fix him? Daddy can't afford a new one." Before we begin, take a second. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. It was a quiet, overcast afternoon, the kind where the sky feels heavy and everything seems to move a little slower. People hurried along the sidewalk, heads down, coats pulled tight against the wind. And then, tiny footsteps stopped in front of an old toy repair shop. Its paint was peeling, the windows fogged from the inside. A crooked wooden sign above the door read, "Toy repairs. If it's loved, it's worth fixing." Most folks passed by without a second glance. But this little girl, she stood there for a moment, hugging a ragged stuffed bear tightly to her chest. Her hat was slipping off one side of her head, her shoes slightly too big. The teddy in her arms was missing an eye, stuffing peeked through its seams, and one of its ears drooped like it was tired of holding on. She pushed the door open. A small bell above it jingled softly. Inside, the shop was still. The scent of old wood and oil lingered in the air. Shelves lined with well-loved toys filled the room, some smiling with button eyes, some frozen in time like relics of forgotten joy. Behind the counter sat an older man, hunched slightly, thick glasses resting low on his nose. His hands, stained with grease, carefully worked on the inner gears of a wind-up train. When he looked up and saw her, his hand stopped. The girl stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you fix my teddy?" she asked. There was a pause. Then she added, even softer, "Daddy can't afford a new one." The man didn't answer right away. He stood slowly, walked around the counter, and crouched beside her. He reached out, gently taking the teddy in his hands, turned it over, examined the missing eye, the loose stitching, the torn fabric. "This little guy's been through a lot," he murmured. Then he looked up at her. Her eyes were wide, hopeful, a little afraid. "But I think I can help," he said. And just like that, a smile broke across her face. Small, shy, and warm. She handed him the teddy. And in that simple exchange, something unspoken passed between them. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his. But in that moment, a broken toy became the beginning of something bigger. Not just a repair, not just kindness, a quiet thread that would soon tie their lives together in ways neither of them could yet imagine. They say every town has that one place that feels stuck in time. For this neighborhood, it was his toy shop, wedged between a shuttered bakery and a boarded-up bookstore. It was easy to miss, unless you were really looking. But those who noticed it, noticed him too. The old man with the silver hair, always hunched slightly forward, as if he was listening to something the rest of the world had forgotten, always in the same cardigan, always with a smudge of glue or grease on his fingertips. He never spoke much, didn't go to town meetings, didn't attend the block parties or wave from the window like the other shopkeepers. But the lights in his shop glowed long after sunset, and if you passed by late enough, you might see him sitting under that flickering lamp, carefully stitching a doll's dress or replacing the tiny wheel on a toy truck. It wasn't a busy place. Most days, no one came in, but he never closed, never complained, never raised his prices. Some said he just liked to be around toys, that maybe he missed something from his past, a child, a family, a home that used to be filled with laughter. Others whispered that he was once a toy maker for a big company, retired now, choosing peace over profit. No one really knew, but what was known was how he treated every toy like it was made of glass and memories, like each one held a story too sacred to throw away. Toys didn't just get fixed in that shop. They were restored, rescued, loved, and he never asked questions, never judged a parent for bringing in a broken doll instead of buying a new one, never turned away a child who came in with only hope in their eyes. He just nodded, listened, worked, and somehow, even without many words, he made people feel seen. So when that little girl walked in with her one-eyed teddy, he didn't need to ask why she was there. He already understood, because the man who fixed broken toys Probably knew a thing or two about broken hearts, too. And behind those quiet eyes, behind that dusty counter and cluttered workbench, was a story no one had heard yet. But soon, they would, and it would change everything. Just a few blocks away from the toy shop, in a modest, rundown apartment tucked above a laundromat, she lived with her father. It wasn't much. One bedroom, a flickering heater, and walls thin enough to hear the city breathe at night. But it was theirs, and he did his best to make it feel like home. The kitchen table was cluttered with unopened mail. Job listings, mostly. Applications printed, crumpled, reprinted again. A half-empty coffee mug sat beside them, long since gone cold. He was a good man, the kind who always wore the same work boots, even when he had nowhere to go. The kind who made pancakes with too much batter just to see her smile. Who never let on how hard things had gotten. He had lost his job 3 months ago. Warehouse downsizing. One of the unlucky ones, they said. He said it was fine. Said he'd find something else. Said it like a promise, even when he was starting not to believe it himself. At night, after she'd fallen asleep, clutching her threadbare teddy, he'd sit on the edge of the couch, head in his hands, shoulders heavy with the weight of unspoken worry. He didn't tell her how the rent was already late, or how the electricity bill sat unpaid in the drawer, or how the man in the hallway had warned. One more week, and I'm going to have to say something to the landlord. But kids, they notice more than we think. She saw the holes in his work shirts, the quiet sighs, the way he stared out the window, just a little too long after mail arrived. She never asked for much, just held on to her teddy, that one-eyed, ragged thing that he once won for her at a street fair, back when things were easier, back we could still afford popcorn and carousel tickets and silly prizes that meant the world. So when the bear finally tore, it seemed splitting after years of hugs and midnight cuddles. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for a new one. She just hugged it tighter, and the next day walked into that toy shop alone. Not because she didn't need help, but because she knew her daddy couldn't afford to ask. Back in that apartment, he didn't know she had gone. Not yet. He just stood at the stove, stirring cheap soup in a dented pot, wondering how long he could keep pretending that everything was going to be okay. But outside, something had already begun to shift, because his little girl had found kindness in a place no one expected. And soon, without even knowing it, she was about to bring that kindness home. The shop was quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels full, not empty. On the counter, under a soft desk lamp, the little girl's teddy bear lay still. It seems pulled, stuffing exposed. Its one remaining eye dull with time. The shopkeeper sat down slowly. No rush, no noise, just him and the bear. He reached for his tools. A small curved needle, fine brown thread, a magnifying lens. Not factory tools, not the kind used for mass production. These were the tools of someone who cared, of someone who understood that some things can't just be replaced. They have to be mended. He picked up the teddy, turned it over in his weathered hands, gently, carefully, as if he was holding someone's memory, because he was. A child's toy isn't just a toy. It's the friend that chased away the dark, the one who listened to bedtime secrets, the one who stayed, even when no one else did. He started with the stitching, one loop at a time, slow, deliberate movements, like he was sewing a story back together. He patched the belly, tightened the seams on the arms, reinforced the neck where the fabric had thinned. Every thread, a quiet promise. Then came the eye. He reached into a drawer filled with mismatched buttons, each one collected over years of careful work. And after a few moments, he found it, a button almost identical to the original. Not perfect, but close enough that only someone truly looking would know the difference. He smiled. Perfect isn't the point, he thought. Loved is. He polished a new eye, sewed it in place, tied it off with a firm, invisible knot. But before he closed the final seam, he did something extra, something she would never see. He took a tiny red patch, heart-shaped, no bigger than a coin, and tucked it gently inside the teddy's chest. A signature of sorts. his way of saying, "You are loved. Still. Always." Then he sewed the last line, snipped the thread, and sat back. The teddy looked different now. Not new, but whole. Stronger, somehow, like it had been through something, and come out softer, wiser, ready to be held again. The old man leaned back in his chair, a quiet breath escaping his lips. Not every toy could be saved, but this one had found its way home again, and in fixing it, he felt something small and good settle in his chest. Like maybe, just maybe, he'd stitched up something inside himself, too. The next morning, the bell above the shop door rang softly. She was back. That same little girl. Same red knit hat, slightly askew. Only this time, her eyes were wide with something more than hope. It was expectation, and maybe just a little bit of magic. She stepped inside, her small hands clutched around the strap of her backpack, and beside her, her father, tired eyes, worn jacket, a cautious look, like he wasn't sure whether he belonged there. The shopkeeper looked up from behind the counter. He said nothing, just reached under the counter and lifted the teddy bear onto the surface. As a presenting crown, the girl's breath caught. She didn't say a word. She just walked forward, slowly, reached out carefully, and cradled the teddy in her arms like it was a living thing, like it had come back to her. And in a way it had. The stitching was perfect, the eye back in place. Clean, but still familiar. Still hers. She hugged it tight, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Not loudly, not for show. Just a small, honest thank you from a child who knew what it meant to lose something and what it meant to have it returned. Her father stepped forward, reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill, creased and worn like it had been handled too many times. I can give you this," he said, voice low. "It's not much, but..." The shopkeeper shook his head. "No charge," he said gently. "Some things are more important than money." The father paused, looked at the man in disbelief, not insulted, not defensive, just unsure of how to receive kindness that asked for nothing back. He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped, and instead, he just nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly. The kind of thank you that carried weight, that came from deep in the chest, from a place where words don't always reach. And the old man, he nodded, too, not as a businessman, not even as a craftsman, but as someone who understood what it means to give and what it means to need. The girl held her teddy tight, the small red heart stitched inside resting gently against her chest, and the three of them stood there, surrounded by dusty shelves and forgotten toys, in a moment that felt like the world had stopped spinning, just for a second. And in that second, something had been restored. Not just a toy, not just a smile, but dignity, hope, connection. And none of them knew it yet, but this wasn't the end of their story. Not even close. After they left, the shop fell quiet again. The door clicked shut. The bell above it stopped ringing. And for a moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock. The old man stood behind the counter, his hands resting on the wood, but his mind somewhere else. Something about that little girl and her father had stayed with him. It wasn't the bear, or even the way she'd smiled when she saw it again. It was him, the father, the way his shoulders stayed tense. Even when kindness was handed to him, the way he hesitated to accept something for free, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to receive. The shopkeeper walked a window. He watched them disappear down the sidewalk, her skipping slightly, holding the teddy in one arm, him walking a step behind, carrying the weight of something invisible. The man hesitated. Then he reached for his coat. He didn't really know why, only that he couldn't let it end there. So he followed, not in a hurry, not to intrude, just enough distance to stay unnoticed, but close enough to see. They walked for nearly 10 minutes, weaving through quiet streets, past shuttered stores and tired buildings. No playgrounds, no bike racks, just cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. Finally, they turned into an old brick building, its front door hanging just slightly off-center. a rusted mailbox, one broken step. He stopped across the street, watched as they disappeared inside, watched the light come on in the second floor window, watched as the little girl held her teddy up to the glass, like she was introducing him to the stars. The man's gaze softened. He didn't know much about their story yet. Not the details, not the names, but he could see enough. The worry in the father's walk, the threadbare jacket, the tired eyes. He saw a man doing everything he could, with almost nothing left, and something stirred in him. A quiet ache, a flicker of recognition, because once, long ago, he'd been on the other side of that glass, the one looking down, the one hoping someone would notice. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card, plain cream-colored, with only 4 words. Come by tomorrow, 10 a.m. No explanation, no signature. He crossed the street, slipped the card into the mailbox, and walked away. He didn't know if the man would show up, but something told him that he would, because sometimes all someone needs is a reason to believe that they're not invisible, that someone still sees them. The next morning, just before 10, he showed up, same jacket, same boots, same quiet hesitation in his step. He held the card in his hand. Creased now, like he'd folded and unfolded it more times than he'd admit. The toy shop looked the same, but today it felt different. He stepped inside. The bell jingled gently. The shopkeeper was already there, waiting behind the counter, sipping tea from a small ceramic cup. No application, no clipboard, no questions, just a chair pulled out across from him. And silence. The father cleared his throat. I got your card, he said, voice low. The shopkeeper nodded. Good, he said. Come with me? No explanation, no small talk. He grabbed his coat, locked the front door, and motioned toward a car parked along the curb. It was unexpected, not a rusty old pickup like the father imagined. This was different. Black, clean, the kind of car that didn't belong to a man who ran a toy repair shop. He opened the passenger door and waited. The father hesitated, looked back at the shop, then at the man beside him. There was something in his eyes, not pity, but purpose. So he got in. The drive was quiet. City blocks rolled past. They didn't speak much, but slowly the buildings began to change. Less wear and tear, fewer broken signs, glass, steel, wide sidewalks. They pulled up to a gated property, a large campus, dozens of windows, polished floors, a flag with a logo waving above the doors, a bright red T shaped like a toy block. Tilden Toys, one of the biggest toy companies in the country. The father blinked. He looked at the building, then at the man beside him. You work here? The shopkeeper didn't answer. He smiled softly, then stepped out of the car. Inside, it was even more surreal. Receptionists greeted them. Security nodded respectfully. Employees whispered his name as he passed. Mr. Tilden. The father followed closely, eyes wide. It didn't make sense. Mr. Tilden? They walked through a hallway lined with framed photos. Classic toys, award ceremonies, patents, old press clippings. And there, near the center, a faded black and white photo of a much younger version of the man he thought he knew, holding a teddy bear, smiling. The same eyes, just younger and lighter. They reached the corner office. Big windows, wall-to-wall bookshelves, a single desk, clean and quiet. The older man turned to him, finally spoke. I never meant to run a toy empire, he said. I just wanted to fix things. One by one. He paused, then met the father's eyes. You were a warehouse manager, right? The father nodded, still unsure where this was going. I checked, the man continued. You're overqualified to sweep floors, but not to run an entire logistics wing. Silence. The words hit like bricks and then floated like feathers. You're offering me a job? The father asked, slowly. I'm offering you a chance, the man replied, because someone once gave me one, when all I had was a broken bear and a tired smile. The father didn't know what to say. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes glassy. Because this wasn't a job interview. There were no resumes, no tests, no suits or scripted answers. This was something else, something rarer. This was belief, offered freely, no strings, just trust. And for the first time in months, he stood a little straighter, breathed a little deeper, because sometimes the right door doesn't look like a boardroom. It looks like a dusty toy shop on a forgotten street. He stood there in that office, still trying to process what had just been offered to him. A job, a future, a chance, when he hadn't even asked for one. And across the room, the old man who had stitched up his daughter's teddy was now offering to stitch his life back together, too. The father finally spoke. "I don't get it," he said softly. "Why me? Why do you care?" The shopkeeper walked a window. He looked out over the city skyline, hands in his pockets, shoulders still slightly hunched. Then he said it calmly, quietly, almost like a confession. "Because I built this entire company from a teddy bear." The room went still. The father blinked. He thought he misheard. The old man turned around, eyes filled with something deeper than pride. "Years ago," he began, "I was just a kid, living in a shelter with my mother. No toys, no bed of my own. Just one thing I kept with me. A little stuffed bear someone gave me when we moved in." He smiled. Wasn't anything fancy. It had mismatched buttons, torn ears, probably fixed a dozen times. But I loved it. He paused. And one night, it tore right down the seam. I cried like I'd lost a friend. His voice dropped, more gravel now, but steady. That same night, a janitor at the shelter, a quiet man with rough hands and a stitched-up coat, he saw me crying. He sat with me for an hour, didn't say much, just fixed the bear. He looked down at his own hands. I never forgot that. Not the man, not the kindness, not how it felt to hold something broken and watch it become whole again. He took a breath. That moment started everything. That bear got me through school, through loneliness, through nights when I didn't think I mattered. I grew up, learned to sew, built my first toy from scraps in my garage. And then I built this place. He looked around the office, not with pride, but with quiet gratitude. Tilden Toys isn't built on money or numbers, he said. It's built on moments, on tiny, quiet act of kindness that no one sees. He turned to father, his voice softer now. "So, when your little girl walked into my shop, clutching a broken teddy, asking for help without asking for pity, I saw myself, all over again." He stepped closer. "And when I saw you, trying to stay proud, trying to stay strong, doing everything for her, with nothing left for yourself, I knew you weren't asking for a handout. You were holding on. And sometimes, holding on is the bravest thing a man can do." The room was quiet. The father's eyes had gone glassy, his jaw clenched, holding back more than just words. And for a long moment, they just stood there. No title, no job offer, just two men who understood something unspoken. Finally, the old man said, "I don't just fix toys." He smiled gently. "I fix what I can while I still can." And that was the truth behind the shop, behind the company, behind the man. It was never about the teddy bear. It was about what it carried. Love, memory, hope. And sometimes that's all it takes to build a new life. That night, back in their small apartment, something felt different, lighter, warmer, like the weight on the father's chest had finally loosened, just enough to let hope in again. He stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her hum softly to herself, her teddy bear safely tucked under her chin. She held it like it was brand new, and somehow, even more than that, as he stepped closer to pull up her blanket, she turned the teddy over her hands. Not roughly, just curious, like she sensed something hidden, something waiting to be found. Her little fingers fell along the seams, and that's when she noticed it. A small bump inside the fabric, beneath the chest, carefully stitched in, soft but firm, like a secret. She pressed it gently, then looked up at her father. "Daddy, there's something in his tummy," she whispered. He sat beside her, took the bear, turned it over slowly. There, beneath the stitching, was a tiny red patch in the shape of a heart, barely visible, quietly placed, tucked away where only love could find it. He smiled softly because he knew this wasn't just part of the repair. This was intentional. He ran his thumb across the fabric, and for a moment, the memory of that old man's words echoed in his mind. "I fix what I can while I still can." And in that heart, sewn quietly into the chest of a forgotten bear, was something more than thread and cloth. It was a message that broken things can be mended, that kindness can be quiet and still be powerful, that sometimes the smallest acts are the ones that last the longest. His daughter leaned against him, her eyes growing heavy. She clutched the bear tighter, smiling as she drifted off. And as he sat there, watching her sleep beneath a cracked ceiling and faded wallpaper, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because life would be easy now, but because someone had seen them, really seen them, and chose to care anyway. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes. But inside that room, a little girl dreamed sweetly. A teddy bear guarded her heart, and a father quietly promised himself that no matter how hard it got, he'd never let the light go out again. And somewhere, in a quiet shop on a quiet street, an old man turned off his lamp, placed his tools back in their drawer, and smiled to himself because love had found its way home. And for once, everything felt just right. Sometimes, the biggest changes in our lives begin with the smallest gestures. A stitch, a smile, a quiet act of kindness, offered without a spotlight, without expectation, and without asking for anything in return. That teddy bear, it wasn't just patched up with thread. It was stitched with care, with memory, with a reminder that broken things and broken people can still be made whole, not by replacing them, but by believing they're still worth saving. The old man never gave a speech, never boasted, never asked to be noticed, but what he did spoke louder than any words ever could, because compassion doesn't need permission. It just shows up, quiet, steady, unshakable, and maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needs more of right now. So here's a question for you. Have you ever been helped by a stranger? Or maybe, have you ever been the one who helped? Share your story in the comments. You never know who it might touch. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you feel just a little more seen, a little more hopeful, take a moment to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, because here we tell stories that remind us who we are and who we can be. Thank you for watching. Be kind, take care of each other, and we'll see you in the next story.